Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome everyone into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology turned podcast. Everyone, welcome to the program. I hope that you're doing well and you are ready for the show today. So everyone on the program today, we have the one, the only, Mr. Ralph Bond. He will be joining us here in just a moment. He is our science and technology trends correspondent. And ladies and gentlemen, we have another slew of stories for you that, they're going to be great. They're going to be upbeat. They're going to be science heavy. And, just hopefully you go into Friday feeling good because, hey, there are good things happening out there and Ralph's the perfect one to find them. So with that being said, computeramerica.com, that's where you'll find everything, including past shows, future shows, show notes, articles, podcasts, contests, giveaways, so on and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, be sure to check out our website. And of course, we'll also have a link to Ralph's website where not only does he have our show, but also his segments that he does with KEX over Portland, Oregon, over on the Mark Mason Show. And hey, if you want a more Ralph-focused segment, check out his website. And, I always say this, our past shows aren't really that old, quote-unquote, because a lot of it is research, cutting-edge new stuff that, will be coming out kind of soon. And it's, always relevant. So be sure to check out our past programs with Ralph. Now, all that being said, computeramerica.com one last time. And yeah, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and bring in our guests. So as I said before, science and technology trends, you can guess what today's show is going to be about. Joins us every single Friday, Ralph Bond. Ralph, welcome back onto the program.
Great to be back. And I'll tell you what, we're going to start today with a remarkable new satellite and end with a really surprising discovery about the human brain. Can you believe there's still stuff about the human body that scientists haven't discovered yet? This is a great story that we'll end today with.
That sounds perfect. And I've often wondered how even my own brain works. So I'm glad that someone else is doing research into this. It's a very complicated mess up there. But in the meantime, Ralph, I know that you have a little intro that, tell the nice folks out there who may be new what we try to do in our segments.
Yeah, you bet. If you're new, welcome. It's great to have you. And what I do is I'm an aggregator of science and tech news features I find by monitoring a host of online news outlets all the time. And I look for important stories that don't usually capture mainstream press attention. And sometimes they're kind of weird or quirky and fun and so forth. But most of the time, they're pretty serious. And I'm always on the lookout for news that gives a glimpse into where we're headed in robotics, medical technology, sustainable energy technology, transportation advances, space research, physics, you name it, across the board. And what I do with each news item is present the essential points in a really digestible form, kind of condensed. And I stress to our audience to check out the show notes, which Ben is displaying right now. Get to these show notes if you want to learn more, because we have pictures and links and so forth, and you can dive deeper and go as geeky as you want. So we're just going to give you the highlights. That's what Ben and I do every Friday.
Absolutely. And as Ralph said, the video portion is always fun to watch because we have, we kind of explore the articles, show videos, demonstrations when applicable. But ladies and gentlemen, for those just listening, don't worry, we have your back. And let's go ahead, sit back and relax. And Ralph, let's start with story number one.
Yeah, story number one, got this from CNN. A new satellite can now measure nearly all the Earth's water. And last month, an innovative satellite created through a joint effort between NASA and the French Space Agency, I always love these collaborations, was launched into orbit by a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from the Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. Now, I want to stop for a second and stress that this is not the first satellite to do what we're going to talk about it doing. Okay, we've had some satellites up there doing this, but this is a huge improvement. So I digress for a second. Let's get back to the story. Using cutting-edge radar technology that took years to develop. The International Surface Water and Ocean Topography Mission satellite, SWOT is the acronym, will survey water on more than 90% of the world's surface every 21 days, measuring the height of water in freshwater bodies and the oceans. So, time out. Let's take a little bit of a step back here. A little bit more about this satellite's new innovative radar. It's Ka-band radar interferometer, which is an altimeter used to measure water surface heights. It's able to detect features that are up to 10 times smaller than those picked up by sea level satellites. So we're going to explain that. That's what I meant at the beginning here, that this is not the first satellite to try to measure water surface heights in both the oceans and freshwater, but it's 10 times more articulate, I guess you could say. It could deal with objects 10 times. Thank you. Much more sensitive. So time out. What does the Ka and K band stand for? Kurtz above. That's KURTZ above band. And this is a frequency range allocated from 17.7 gigahertz on the downlink and up to 30.6 gigahertz on the uplink for use by satellite communication systems. So that's this very cutting edge radar that we're talking about. So timeout. We mentioned sea level satellites. What's this all about? Here's the answer from NASA. NASA measures sea level around the globe using satellites. The Jason 3 satellite, for example, uses radio waves and other instruments to measure the height of the ocean's surface, also known as sea level. It does this for the entire Earth every 10 days, studying how global sea leveling is changing over time. So every 10 days, this satellite has been doing its job, and that's great. But we now have one that every 21 days is going to do the same function, but with greater detail and articulation. So back to the premise or the setup here. So the Earth's salt and freshwater bodies of water shape our weather and climate as they store and move carbon and heat trapped in the atmosphere by greenhouse gas emissions. So with that said, the goal of this satellite is to show how oceans influence climate change, as well as how global warming is impacting lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. The satellite surveying will help scientists understand the global water budget. Ding, ding, ding. I want to stop there and stress that sentence. Help scientists understand the global water budget. We all know what's going on in the Southwest and California and so forth with the reservoirs drying up and horrible stuff. This is what we're talking about. So to measure or to look at the global water budget and to see how the heat exchange between the Earth's atmosphere and bodies of water may be accelerating global warming. So there's a whole range of tasks that this new satellite is going to take on. And the satellite's data, and this is where the rubber meets the road, right? A lot of times some of the stuff is esoteric science, and general listeners will go, well, okay, that's nice, but what does this mean to me? Check this out. The satellite's data will also help national, state, and local government agencies, frankly, around the world, better prepare for flooding and other water-related disasters, such as what we just witnessed in California, right? Remember what just happened, which is increasing due to yucky old global warming. So there's a real practical purpose to this beyond just science data. So I love this story, and I love the collaboration between NASA and the French Space Agency. I love that kind of stuff. I also like it when NASA collaborates with the Japanese Space Agency. I think that's really cool. And someday, friends, someday we'll be able to hold hands with our Russians. Oh, let me get past this ridiculous Ukraine stuff. Anyway, there you go. A good old classic space race does make some strange allies, and and some really good collaborations. So I completely agree with you on that one. And I will say that, Ralph, it kind of speaks to, at least in my mind, the state of technology. Is that when I kind of read the headline, I'm sure when a lot of people heard the headline, can now measure all the Earth's water, like,
technology is going so fast into like the futuristic stuff that I'm like, oh wow, they can tell how many people are living in an area, and you can think about for intelligence purposes, be able to determine, if there are so many things taking water from here, if they're pumping water for, let's say, power generation. I was like, oh, real time, constant water, kind of information, but it's not that. Like you said in the article, every 21 days, it's going to take different, kind of levels of all, a bunch of different bodies. Really incredible that it's able to do, to do that. But what I'm trying to say is, it's hard to tell what's science fiction and what's actually happening, because man, technology is just advancing so fast, and what's possible out there. And I'm glad that at least this does exist, that we're able to get better information to hopefully put into the models and, kind of fight this climate change thing. Because I know that's a big topic here on our program, with you, is, kind of the effects and how, there are problems that we're dealing with. But at the same time, hopefully technology is going to, mitigate, if not, hopefully reverse in some cases. We've seen work in plastic and ocean levels and, kind of, one of my favorite, Ralph, and then we'll move on to story number 2. One of my favorite for people to go back and dig through our archives. I really like, for example, the story of, or at least the idea of putting bubbles into space between the Earth and the sun, and being able to deflect,
MIT's idea, right?
Be able to deflect, a certain percentage of the sun's energy so that it cools Earth just that little bit to give us an edge. There are solutions, and it's really cool to see technology answer the call in a lot of different ways.
And friends, if you're interested in this and don't recall that segment that Ben and I did a couple months ago, just do a Google search, MIT bubbles in space to fight global warming, and you'll find several articles in MIT's own newsroom, which is wonderful, by the way. It's a freaky, wild idea, but maybe
it could happen. So, and ladies and gentlemen, that's the best part. Our stories, they're all things that are happening. All research scientists. There's real thought and effort put into all of these. So, story number 2, let's go ahead and move on a little bit to the University of Minnesota.
Yes. So headline here is University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, actually, is the formal name for the institution. The researchers there can move objects without touching them. So if you've ever wanted to be a Jedi Knight and do that cool stuff, these guys have figured out scientifically how to do something similar to it. And I want to stop with a qualifier right before we start. What we're talking about here is not the first time this has been done, but rather the largest objects ever before using this technology. So let me really get into this now. A team of researchers at the University of Minnesota, Twin Cities, has discovered a way to move and manipulate objects larger than ever before using only ultrasound waves. So we can't hear ultrasound waves because they have a higher frequency than the human ear can hear. And remember, ultrasound is what's used. Women are pregnant, they go to the doctor takes the gel and the wand. That's an ultrasound device. And you can't hear it, but it's doing its sound waves activity for the purposes of imaging in that case. So again, as I stressed, this is not the first time sound waves have been used to move objects. It's been demonstrated before that light, this is interesting, light and sound waves can move and manipulate objects, but the objects in experiments to date have been tiny, a few millimeters when using sound, and a few nanometers, that's billionths of a meter, in size when using light. That's the setup, so keep this in mind now. The university team developed a method using ultrasound waves that can move much larger objects. In their experiment video, they manipulate an object which I reckon to be about the size of a large jumbo pack of chewing gum, right? A little rectangle. But now, look, I get it. That's still a small object, but of course, future advances may significantly increase the size. And even if you're talking about objects the size of the current experiment, that still could be significant for certain applications. So to make this possible, this was interesting for me because I hadn't been aware of this before. The team is using some very geeky science dealing with the physics of meta materials, which are materials that are engineered and designed to interact with light or sound waves. So more on metamaterials here. Metamaterials are a novel class of functional materials that are designed around unique micro and nanoscale patterns or structures, which cause them to interact with light and other forms of energy, in this case sound, in ways not found in nature. Not found in nature. Isn't that interesting? So here's what these guys and gals did at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. By placing a metamaterial pattern, and you see this in the video, on the surface of an object, the researchers were able to use ultrasound waves to steer and move objects in a controlled direction without physically touching them. And again, objects larger than ever before. The University of Minnesota team says, and here's where the rubber meets the road, as we said in the previous story. The University of Minnesota team says their research will help pave the way for contactless movement of objects in manufacturing, robotics, and much more, whatever your imagination can come up with. And the key here is all without the need for any internal power source driving the object being moved or to be moved. That's the idea. Can you have an object that doesn't require its own energy source to move? Yes, through light and sound, and in this case, ultrasound. So I just thought this was really, really cool stuff.
Definitely a lot of implications, and I can see where definitely in manufacturing, Ralph, I'm sure that I'm not the most, nuanced in all the things with manufacturing, but I can imagine that if you have a part that can be operated for some reason and it doesn't have to contact anything, there's no lubrication, there's no wear and tear, there's no this, that, or the other, no internal power source, so there's no having to worry about electricity. I mean, you can imagine, for some application, if it can just simply be moved just by, pointing a beam of energy at it, that'd be a lot less wear and tear and a lot less replacement and a lot less cost, which is always important. And I do want to give a shout out to one of the comments on the video. That would be Peter saying, I can push people away by singing, but this is awesome as well. So poor Peter. I hope
that's very funny. And I was thinking too, Ben, as you were commenting, that think of situations where you have to be in a highly sterile environment, chip production, other things of this nature, where people have to bunny suit and go through incredible time just to get ready to go into the manufacturing fab, right? Yes. Well, what if you could move objects without touching them? Of course, that could be very important, maybe important in medical situations. I don't know. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. And that's what I've said. I mean, manufacturing, robotics, and much more, your imagination can just go wild on how this could be applied, even with objects as small as a jumbo-sized pack of gum, right? That's still useful.
Exactly. And I kind of wish that they, kind of had a little bit more scale here in the video. But I would say about the size of a deck of cards, one would assume.
Yeah, kind of hard to say.
It's a completely black, kind of background with no other points of reference. But still, it is a large object, and they are able to move it completely, completely like that. So very impressive.
Cool.
And very interesting to know that the pattern actually did play a part. I thought the pattern was just kind of a cool design. No, the pattern makes the whole thing. So
isn't that fascinating? That whole metamaterial pattern business, it just was all new to me, and I just thought, wow, that's so interesting.
Metamaterials are definitely something that get absolutely no spotlight, because metamaterials by and large are kind of application based. They're made for a purpose, and sometimes there's some cross contamination where this material is actually really good heat resistant, really good heat conductor, really good this, that, or the other. And but mostly these materials are made for one purpose only, and you get cool research like this. So very cool for the University of Minnesota to do this. So story number 2, and ladies and gentlemen, again, we'll have the video in the show notes. Story number 2, story number 3. Let's go ahead and move on to this. And this is something that's been promised ever since really solar panels have kind of made it onto the scene. This idea that hey, solar panels and solar cars, and just putting solar panels in places you never really thought. Hopefully we're still heading in that direction. And story number 3 looks like we probably are.
Yeah, and this is an example of a trend story, not a never before seen on Earth breakthrough kind of science story that we often do. So this is really a trend thing. So the headline here is viability of solar cars just got a big vote of confidence. I got this from the Netherlands Times, and you'll see why Netherlands in a moment. So let me do the setup here. What if your all-electric car's roof and body were covered with mini solar panels, harvesting electricity whenever they're exposed to sunlight? Imagine you go to work, you park your car out in the parking lot, it's exposed to the sunlight for 8 or 9 hours. Get the picture? So what if you had mini solar panels all over your car, harvesting electricity whenever they're exposed to sunlight to augment, not replace, but to augment the electricity pumped into a vehicle's batteries using a traditional charging port? What if you had that? Well, to me, that's a real win-win concept. And add to that plug-in hybrid, by the way, and I think you've got the ideal car. But what we're going to talk about here are all electric cars that have these additional solar panels. So that's the idea we just laid out behind so-called solar cars. So be careful here. It doesn't mean only solar power to run these vehicles. It's augmentation. Okay. So they can add, typical solar cars that are out there today are adding anywhere from 15 to 45 miles of range on a clear day. And if you think about the AAA, I believe the American Automobile Association estimates the average American commutes maybe a max of 30 miles a day, not each way, total. So you can see 15 to 45 miles of range is meaningful, right?
Yeah, to add a little bit of context as well, I think some of the best electric cars out there are still running 300 is like good, in like ideal conditions.
Yes.
And like, some claim 350, but good luck getting that. So an extra 45 miles on a maximum 300 mile trip, that's not nothing. That's really good.
Yeah. And I'll segue or side note for a moment. We have a RAV4 plug-in hybrid, and there's plenty of great plug-in hybrids. So Ralph Bond is not endorsing or, whatever. Okay, get over that for a second. But plug-in hybrids, people are fabulous. And if I could add solar panels to that scenario, I would be in heaven. My plug-in hybrid RAV4, my wife and I laughed the other day. We got gasoline. He said, "When was the last time we got gas?" It was 3.5 months ago. Because
that's really cool.
We drive maybe, less than 10 miles. Well, we probably in a week drive less than 50 miles tops. Okay. Because we're just commuting to the local grocery store and that kind of stuff. Our plug-in hybrid, when it's fully charged, gives us roughly about 40 miles. And so you can see we never buy gasoline. It's wonderful. Anyway, I digress.
When I read that, I was definitely thinking about you and your car, and I was like, 45-mile charge, and I'm like, so this thing could probably obviously we're going to talk about, or at least people can see the pictures in the show notes of what this car looks like. But, although that's an example, but, it's going to be more investment putting the solar panels on it, but you could charge something like a RAV4 completely on these solar panels if you had them installed. I mean, it is definitely a win-win idea, like you said.
Exactly. So back to the story in a way here. Proof of the growing commercial market interest in solar cars, that's the key here, that's the trend, happened this month when Dutch car maker Lightyear inked a deal with a car leasing company called Arval, that's Arval, to produce 10,000 units of its solar Lightyear 2 model. This is the company's second solar car model. Now, the key to Lightyear's success to date, and this is so important, has been their ability to produce a solar car for less than 40,000 euros. That's about $43,000 US.
Yeah.
And Lightyear, now here's the thing I wanted to stress and share with people because it was a bit of a revelation for me as well. Lightyear is not the only company developing solar cars, not by a long stretch. Toyota, for example, has a car with solar panels on the roof and hood. Now, I haven't seen one, but they apparently do have it, as you can see here in the image in the show notes. It's kind of interesting. And, I'm such a geek that I would love to run around town with this geeky looking thing. I don't know if my wife would go, "It looks stupid." No, it's very cool.
Yeah. It takes the place of a traditional paint job. At least the Toyota one does. Yeah.
Yes. And you can't do a sunroof, although it's a pun. You actually do have a sunroof if you get my picture. We're looking at the picture of the Toyota car in question. Okay, other manufacturers include, not household names, Fisker, Fisker, Ocean. Cool looking SUV they have there with their solar panels on the top roof there. Aptera Sol, Aptera, separate word, SOL for sun. Aptera Sol. This thing's a freaky tri-wheel or three-wheel vehicle, very futuristic looking.
So we've actually seen a couple of these, and we've actually had a couple of these on the show. To talk about cars like this, Ralph. They're actually closer to, and I'm sure a lot of people have seen them. The tricycle motorcycles.
Yes.
They're essentially motorcycles that they kind of repurpose and create like a little cabin for. This one has a side by side instead of a front back kind of design like you typically see. But you can think like a slingshot or a dune buggy or a tricycle motorcycle, except they put solar panels on it, which is still a great blending of ideas.
I love it. Yeah, too. And another company is Sono, Sono Motors. They've got a very traditional looking SUV, but you can see that here's what's interesting about their scheme. Notice that they have, and again, friends, if you're just listening, get the show notes, you'll see the pictures. They have solar panels on the hood, roof, and the sides of the vehicle. I mean, they are maximizing solar panel absorption. So again, as I've said, I think this is a really interesting trend to track, and I'm hoping to see solar cars. By the way, friends, I live in the Portland, Oregon area. Next month, February, we have a big international car show here in Portland, and I'm going to be on the lookout for these solar cars. And if I find some, have new information, I'll share it with us in a future show as well. So cool trend to keep track of. I'm very encouraged. And again, I think the answer is plug-in hybrid with solar panels. This makes the most practical for today. I think it would be a fantastic combination.
Yeah, and personally, just something that I was thinking about that we didn't really say in all of that was, cars are a great way to kind of do this, because even if they're just sitting there and let's say they're just plugged up and they're not charging, maybe they could even feed back into the grid because, hey, Ralph, if you don't go out, if you don't use your car that day, it's still sitting there collecting sunlight, generating energy, and maybe even feeding it back into it. So
that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a lot of reason to do something like this, not just for the car's own sake, but hey, each of these cars could be a little source of energy in itself. So very, very cool. And yeah, like you said, that was a trend one, but still, it's a trend that we hope to see really pick up more in the future.
Yes.
Now, story number 3, story number 4, and our last one, as you teased way at the beginning of the show, something more about the brain. And it's Ralph. I remember a couple of years ago, maybe like a decade or two ago, they were like the pancreas completely useless, and they're like, oh well, the pancreas actually does this. It's like a little safe spot for your gut biome to kind of hang out in, and stuff like that. Like even parts of our body that were like, it's vestigial, it's useless, it's there's no point for this, it's evolution wise, we really don't have a need for this anymore, and then they find out a couple years later, oh, we do. We're always learning, and there's always something new about our body that we're not really sure of until we know about it. So story number 4 kind of plays into that, but this one isn't so much about something useless having a use, but more so something that we didn't really notice before.
Yeah, exactly right. And this does represent a kind of technology breakthrough oriented story, because this discovery wasn't possible until recently with advances in technology we'll talk about in a moment here. But the headline, folks, scientists recently discovered a 4th membrane in the human brain. Wasn't there some kind of pop song a few years ago, Insane in the Membrane?
Yes.
And I just kept thinking of that song. It got this from Popular Mechanics recently. And this is another collaboration story. I love collaborations. Recently, scientists at the universities of Rochester and Copenhagen discovered a 4th previously unknown membrane in the brain. Until this breakthrough, scientists thought there were only 3 layers of membranes that protect the brain and spinal cord. The newly discovered 4th membrane is just below what was considered until recently the middle layer, called the arachnoid layer. And arachnoid, as you might think, that sounds like spider stuff. Well, I think it has to do with the look of this middle layer. Got the nickname arachnoid layer. Anyway, the team's findings reveal that this newly found 4th layer helps control the flow of cerebrospinal fluid which cushions the brain and spinal cord. So an incredibly important role it's playing. And this newly discovered fourth layer is also believed to help remove waste from the brain to support immune defense. It could also enable the flushing of toxic proteins associated with Alzheimer's and other neurological diseases from the central nervous system. Holy smokers. Wow.
Yeah.
The researchers were able, and here's where the technology part comes in. The researchers were able to see the thin and delicate fourth membrane, which measures only a few cells in thickness, thanks to recent advancements in neuroimaging and molecular biology. So you could probably dig a whole article on just that alone. And bottom line, here's why this is so important. The Rochester and Copenhagen team hopes this discovery may lead to improved drug delivery, new biological therapies, and a greater understanding of the diseases of the brain. So to me, this hit on all 12 cylinders. Let's go to a 12-cylinder story.
And you can imagine that, let's say there is a disease that causes that layer to degenerate or, to not be able to do its job. Up until now, it's like scientists didn't even know about that layer. So if that was the root cause of the disease, scientists are like, oh, there's a problem with your spinal fluid, it doesn't do this, but they don't really know the actual mechanism. So that is a very important breakthrough. And like you said, understanding diseases of the brain really jumps to mind. And I got to say that, New Scientist, they seem to have a lot of great articles. And Ralph, I further understand your trouble of putting these stories together because, the story over here on the right, metal robot can melt its way out of tight spaces. Next week, I got you. Okay, so I'm jumping ahead a little bit, ladies and gentlemen.
No worries.
Yeah, let's not cheat on our homework, but still.
No, that's cool. That story is all about Terminator 2 coming true.
Yes, absolutely. But still, I can see how we try to keep the segment down to a certain amount. 4 stories seems to be our sweet spot. And Ralph, I think you do a really good job to keep these kind of condensed, uplifting, and really, really interesting. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find out more, computeramerica.com, and of course, Ralph Bond will have a link to his website there as well. And Ralph, thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much for finding these stories. Looking forward to next week, every single Friday, ladies and gentlemen. And by the way, just another heads up, next month will be Computer America's 32nd year running.
Wow.
So big shout out to Craig for starting this whole thing, and of course a big shout out to everyone out there listening for keeping this going. Until next time, everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.